Welcome to Not This, Not That, where we push our boundaries of understanding and perception. I am your host, Rev Patricia Cagganello, and I invite you to join me as we open to the possibility that things may not be exactly as you believe, as you've been told, that there could be more, that in our collective consciousness is the potential for the all. You can find Not This, Not That on the Sacred Stories podcast, on sacredstoriesmedia.com, and on iTunes and all streaming services. Click to subscribe and join us each show. Today, we are expanding our boundaries of understanding on the topic of shamanism, and more specifically, how we can bring shamanic practices into our everyday life. We have the pleasure of speaking with one of our master teachers of the Shaman's Way, our masterclass on shamanism at Sacred U, world-renowned author, teacher, shamanic practitioner, and soul healer, Dr. Stephen Farmer. So welcome, Dr. Farmer, to Not This, Not That.
Oh, thank you, Patricia. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm super excited to have you. I mentioned that you are one of the master teachers of the Shaman's Way, our masterclass on shamanism. And the course that we put together, we just want to give a shout out to that course right now. The masterclass with you, Linda Starwolf, and Ana Maria Vasquez, I think is so important in today's world, for people to have a better understanding and experience of shamanism and shamanic practices.
Yeah, I got to say, Patricia, I had a blast putting that together. I just had a lot of fun. And I think more than just that it was fun is that I know that it's going to be a great service to whoever chooses to sign on and take the course. And here's why, is shamanism and the word shamanism and shamanic has entered into our vocabulary increasingly in the last 20, 25 years or so. I was first introduced to shamanism in my days as a psychotherapist about that time, about 25 years ago. And there weren't a whole lot of people that understood the word or had heard the word. But since then, it's just really moved into the vocabulary. And not just the vocabulary, but the meaning and why it is absolutely critical these days to at least understand it and to come to terms with some of the principles of shamanism. It isn't necessarily about becoming a shamanism. I don't think you can become a shaman or have that ambition so much as you're called to it, like this force of spirit is calling you to study and learn and practice some type of shamanic techniques, and you'll know as to how far you need to go into it as you follow the path. I think the essential part of it, Patricia, is that we have really lost touch with the intimacy with the earth and all the beings of the earth. We tend to think, I think the usual mind that's, gone on for thousands of years since we lost that intimacy with the earth, is that the earth is here for our purpose. That's what it's here for. Our planet. We often talk about our planet. Well, it's not our planet. What it is that this collection of beings, if you will, that are expressing as these different articulations of spirit. And in shamanism, one of the main things about the principles of shamanism, one of the main principles is that you can actually communicate and commune with not just the tree that's outside my door here, or the animal that you happen to see, a bunny hopping across the street, but you can commune with the spirit of those beings and actually receive teachings and messages. That's one aspect, an important aspect of shamanism. And by doing so, what I've seen this, in my own work, Patricia, and workshops and trainings, etc., is how when people really get into this and start to practice this, the whole world opens up in a magical kind of way. It's not just a tree that I'm looking at. Yeah, it is. It's a tree, but there's a life force in that tree that we could call spirit. And even more so, if you take it another step, the third way of perceiving this tree is that there's a spiritual connection between you and that tree. We all talk philosophically like, well, we are all one. Yeah, but to actually experience that, not just have a philosophy or put words on it, but to take a few deep breaths, and then just stay with that tree and gaze at that tree until something starts to move over. You start to feel something of the essence of that tree, for instance. So that's why I've just been, definitely I've been called, like I was saying, 25 years ago. And I read something about shamanism, and then I took a 2-day course, and that's not, you don't take a 2-day course to become a shaman. And I already had a backlog of a lot of experience with my therapy practice, a lot of trainings, spiritual psychotherapy, one way to describe it. But when I did this 2-day course, I caught fire, and I just grabbed as much different kinds of trainings as I could. And it has led me now today to actually offering other people training in it. I have an Earth Magic Practitioner program. In fact, one starting in May, where we meet for 9 months, 4 face-to-face meetings, and then in between online. And people just grab it, and I'm amazed at how many healers actually come for that kind of training. They're already got that foundation. And they are now moving into expanding that realm of being able to, for instance, do the shamanic journey, which is really the guts of any kind of shamanic practice.
Well, thank you for explaining that. It raised a really big question for me that I wasn't even planning on asking, that I do need to ask now. So I'm going to, and then we'll dive a little bit more into really what is shamanism in,
okay,
if we were to define shamanism. But I just have to ask something, because the deepening of my spiritual journey started with the natural world, started with the animals, started with the trees and the stone beings. And they really came to me, Dr. Farmer. I didn't seek them out. And so I didn't even know what was happening. For a very long time, I kept saying that was just the weirdest experience that just happened, or that was kind of terrifying. I had 3 different experiences where a bat was in my bedroom, fluttering above my face over a period of months. And I don't live in a place where bats have ever been in my house ever in my life and since. But for example, so the animals were coming to me. The animals were showing themselves in rocks and all sorts of things. Just beautiful, beautiful experiences once I started to open up to them. But someone asked me one time to explain it, and I really didn't know, and I'm not sure if it really matters, but you had mentioned not only the animal or the tree or the rock, but the spirit of. And so my question is, with your understanding, when the animals come to us, or the trees show themselves to us, or the stone beings, which has happened to me, are those the spirits of, the articulations of spirit, like you said, that are specific to the trees and the animals and the stones? Or is that a greater spirit moving through them to us?
Great question. And it's both and. One way to think about, to kind of grab some perspective on this, is life is all around us. We are an expression of life. I could even say, I am life, or I could say being, or I could say spirit, but let's stick with life for now. I am life expressing as Stephen Farmer. I didn't say life is expressing through me, or spirit is expressing through me, or being is expressing through me. Being is what I am, and it expresses in this particular form, in this particular, as I said, articulation. When we are able to experience even a moment, like I say, standing or sitting with a tree and just closing your eyes, I prescribe this sometimes to my clients, is just breathe with the tree, and they might scratch their heads a little bit. And I said, just go try it out. So in answer to your question, I think of it as 3 ways of perception. And one perception, and it's probably the most common that we're familiar with, is, oh, there's an animal. Oh, I just saw a fox in the forest. Oh, this little hummingbird came to me. Oh, okay, look at this beautiful tree. And all those are absolutely legitimate. It's not one is better than the other. It's just a different way of perceiving. And when we start to move into the second way, we start to appreciate that there's that tree that I'm looking at, or that fox that I saw, or the hummingbird. That is life expressing in that particular form. Or another way to say it, same thing, but a different word, spirit expressing in a certain form. And when I say a certain form, it's like there's, how would I put it? There's spirit, the great spirit, which is almost ineffable. It's hard to grab a hold of. It's like trying to grab hold of God. In fact, some African communities, indigenous communities, they believe you can't really talk directly to God. And God's okay too, God expressing as this hummingbird. I'm okay with any of those words, whatever works for you, but you get the sense and feeling that life force is expressing as this particular being, or even the one who's speaking now. When you go in that place of being so detached but aware, in a state of pure awakening, you really get what's going on, which is that we're all, almost trite and corny to say, but we're all connected in that way. Scientists, physicists are even supporting this now. It's so beautiful to see science coming in and saying, yeah, we're all connected energetically. Of course we are. What I do affects many, many things that I have no awareness of. So the third way of perceiving, Patricia, is that there is there's not just the life force in the tree, but that tree is, you could say, connected as an aspect of the oversoul of all trees, or the collective consciousness of all trees. That hummingbird, yes, it's a hummingbird, and yes, it has a life force. And then the third way of perceiving it is more one that you would do without having any words at all. You would just perceive that, this wonderful being that's before me, which I saw a little hummingbird buzz me just the other day. There's a whole story there too, but this little being has a message for me that spirit is trying to communicate through this particular being. And that's when it gets really, really interesting. And as you well know, and some of the listeners probably know too, I've written a number of books related to shamanic principles and practices. And one of those one of the most popular is Animal Spirit Guides, and and oracle cards and such. And the point of doing that is, again, I was called to do it, is to encourage people to look beyond just the physical form into the life force, certainly, and then into this notion that perhaps that hummingbird that hovered in front of me 3 feet away for a few moments and then flitted around has a message for me. And that's what I teach people, is not only that, but how to interpret those messages. And first off, it's a lot of fun. Children take to it. I was in Colorado, last year, I think it was, and I was doing what was called a rite of passage sessions with a group of 11, 12-year-olds. Get this, Patricia. One of the assignments was, and this was on a ranch where there were horses and lots of trees and such like that. And the assignment was with this group of about 20, 11, 12-year-olds, fifth graders, was to go out and receive a message from a plant or an animal. And I was just astounded, and not totally surprised, but still astounded. They all came back and they shared the messages they got. It was just so beautiful to see this happening with children. So, and they're going to go on, they're going to grow, and they're going to develop that even further. So pretty exciting. I hope I answered your question, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. And I think, and I appreciate that you explained it with the 3 levels, because I believe that it's all of that, you know what I mean?
Yep.
And
Yes.
And maybe it's where we show up in relationship with the animals and the trees and the stones, for example, that level of consciousness expresses. Does that?
Yeah. It's just it's an amazing world. That's why somehow the term earth magic came to me, and that's sort of a foundation, if you will, of my work. It's shamanic too, as well as I carry a lot of the tools from my psychotherapy days. So I'm a healer, and I'll use whatever works to help somebody heal. And of course, the ultimate healing is to overcome this kind of forgetfulness that's common to our species, forgetting who we really are in the context of things.
Mm.
You know, we think that we're dominators and we're going to make the earth serve us, you know, and that's been going on for probably a good 12,000 years or longer. And what instead is, how do we work in harmony with the earth? How do we relate to the earth in a different way? And not just the earth, the planet, but the beings on the planet. To me, that's what that gets my blood up, you know, is knowing that shamanism is such an exceptional path to reunite and to remember. As a mentor of mine said years ago, you know, all this stuff we do, Stephen, it's really to help us remember who we really are. And in a sense, that's my mission, is to help us remember who we really are.
So, Stephen, do you believe that that would be a great description of shamanism if we were to say shamanism is, for those listeners who may not be familiar with the term shamanism? I mean, I know it's pretty all-encompassing. Shamanism can take many different forms, but you speak to the remembering or the reuniting or the respecting with the beings on the earth.
Yes. Yeah, I'd have to take probably 50 words, not 25 words, to describe what shamanism is. But shamanism, one way to think of shamanism, it's the oldest healing system on the earth. There's been evidence on every continent up to 40,000 years ago of shamanic practices. The term shaman comes from the Tungus people in Siberia. It's just a word, but it's kind of the word we use for these practices. In different cultures, they have a different word in their own language for shaman. For instance, African Zulu shamanism, someone is a sangoma. And there are other terms in other cultures for what we would designate as a shaman. The gift of the shaman, he or she, and I'll just say he so I don't have to go he, she. It could be man, woman, it doesn't matter. But the gift of the shaman that comes to them in some way, or they sometimes are born with it, is that they have this ability to send their consciousness into this alternate reality called non-ordinary reality, and there work with helping spirits. And by working with the helping spirits, they then bring back that information that would be in the way of a healing ceremony of some sort, or a blessing ceremony, or a ceremony that had to do with, for instance, the moon, the lunar eclipse that's coming up in just a couple of short days. And they would be given information as to how to honor Grandmother Moon and that period of darkness that she goes into, and what that will, I want to say symbolizes, but symbolizes is a rather weak word for this, but symbolizes or represents, for the human community and other communities on the earth, that this beautiful orb in the sky that we call Grandmother Moon, or sometimes we call it just the moon. But Grandmother Moon implies there's a relationship there. That's why in a lot of indigenous cultures, as you well know, for instance, there's no word for thing or object. Everything is related. When you go into a sweat lodge, which is a purification ceremony, common to the Plains Indians, but Native Americans, but it's spread to other Native American communities. In the Lakota community, you speak the words just before you go into the sweat lodge, Mtakweasin, and it's just simply acknowledging, and what it means translated in English is all my relations. And it's a blessing as you go in there, and a recognition that you are related to everything and all things. Anyway, that's... I think the term shamanism implies a set of principles and techniques that the foundation of which is this shamanic journey, using various means, often a drum beat or a rattle beating. There's other ways too, dancing, humming, plant medicine, etc. But the drumming is interesting enough, Patricia, is typically 4 to 7 beats a second. About like that, as I'm clapping my hands to that rhythm. And what scientists have discovered is that after about 12 minutes, your brain slows down. The brain waves slow down to a theta rhythm, which is 4 to 7 cycles per second. I think I said minutes. I meant 4 to 7 beats per second. and the theta rhythm starts to show up after about 12 minutes. And theta rhythm is a deep kind of a meditative, altered state of consciousness. The other thing that's showing up, I'll say one more thing, is this term shamanic. Like there's certain things that have that flavor of shamanism. I'm trying to think of something. Shamanic astrology comes to mind. A fellow I know that does shamanic astrology that incorporates some of these principles in astrology too. So we're seeing some of that show up more and more, that it has there's a background of shamanism, and we call it, for instance, the journey, we call it a shamanic journey. Stanley Krippner, who's a writer in some of these esoteric, I don't want to say new age metaphysical, but some of that, he calls certain things shamanistic, meaning they have sort of a flavor of it. Specifically, he names Reiki, for instance, has this kind of shamanistic feel to it, but it's not completely shamanism. The practitioner doesn't necessarily do the shamanic journey, but they can bring forth healing, through the Reiki.
Right. So I think it's important to say that that I believe people should work with a shaman that they trust, a trained shaman, if they or the shaman that goes into the non-ordinary reality, right? I wouldn't suggest that
Absolutely.
that were to be a day-to-day practice that someone can do. But work, a trained shaman such as yourself, or receive training in these practices. But you mentioned shamanism as the most ancient healing system in the world. So what are some of you talked about breathing with the trees, which is just a beautiful practice, but what are some other shamanic practices that people without formal training or working with a practiced shaman can do in their lives to practice some
Absolutely.
shamanic practices?
One of my books was Sacred Ceremony, and the intention of that book was to not necessarily call it shamanism, but encourage an important aspect of shamanism, which is bring forth ceremony. And I agree with you. I need to say, I agree with you that you get with a reputable practitioner, somebody who has had some experience that offers this, and just trust your gut, either get a referral or trust your intuition about this person that is designating themselves as a shaman or a shamanic practitioner. So, for instance, there's one, in fact, there's a video in the course, the course that the three of us did. One of my videos was actually a demonstration of something that I call a tree healing. And again, we're working not just with the tree, the physical manifestation of the tree, we're working with the spirit of the tree. And let's say you got some, just some stuff that's working you, anxiety or depression or, problem that's occurring for you. And what I suggest is you go to the tree, you maybe make an offering, you could offer a small pinch of tobacco, for instance, or sage, or simply a prayer of thanks to this tree, this tree for a pre-thank you, for helping you out. And then what you do is you take a few breaths as you stand near the tree, and you take your typically your right hand. It's your giving hand. If you're left-handed, you could do your left hand. But I'll say your right hand, you place it against the bark of the tree, and you breathe. And you ask tree, or more, I think it's even better, is to thank tree. Thank you, tree, for receiving this and grounding it, meaning taking it down through the roots, giving it to Pachamama, Earth Mother, so that she can transform this toxic energy of whatever is being released. And sort of like, not a great analogy, but sort of like a fertilizer for the soil, that it transforms the soil, it changes things. So that toxic energy will then change once the tree has received this. So then what you do is when your hand's on the trees, you just simply breathe, and breathe a little deeper and a little bit slower than you ordinarily might do. And often people report they can actually feel something that's moving down their arm through the palms of their hand into the tree. And then you thank tree spirit for receiving this, and then you kind of shake it off, after maybe 3, 4, 5 minutes that you stand there breathing, and in a way you're breathing with the tree. You'll go into a light trance, which is perfect for this. And then you walk around, you shake it off, and then you ask a tree, or again, I like all my prayers to be thanks, as much as possible. I thank you, tree and tree spirit, for your blessing. And then you put your left hand on the tree. And then what you do is, again, breathe. You just feel the blessing of the tree and also Earth Mother through the representation of this tree. It may not have words. That's not important. And you just have to trust that this is what's going on, is that you're receiving a blessing. And then what you do is you watch what happens the next few days, how you feel. Just note it. If you keep a journal, just note down, what seems to be happening, probably as an effect of this simple ceremony. The full moon coming up. Oh, good grief. Yeah. If you want to get up at 4 a.m. or something like that here on the West Coast, I'm going to. And just observe, number one, observe the lunar eclipse. That's one thing you could do. But also just do a prayer, just prayer thanks. The other thing you do is do a dance. The other is get your socks and shoes off if it's warm enough and put your feet in the dirt. Lift yourself up, put your hands up in the sky, holding with your palms up, in a V kind of a shape, just receiving the blessing of Grandmother Moon. Allow yourself, for instance, to release the darkness in you, because that's what happens in a cycle of a lunar eclipse like that. Releasing the darkness might be something as simple, and I do like simple ceremonies. Releasing the darkness might be, again, your intention, and your prayer is that this darkness be released. You put your hands on the earth and you allow through the palms of your hands that darkness to be released under the witnessing eye of Grandmother Moon. I ran down a lot of different things right then. So those are some samples of sacred ceremonies that you can do that will further connect you and help you be aware and awake to the magic of this world.
Right. And Stephen, I think I'd really just like to make a point here that's super important to me, and I think you will agree that what you're speaking about is not that the trees and the moon and the earth and the animals are not in service to us to take our, to help heal us in this way, right? They're not ours and they're not here for us. But that this is a relationship, or this is a relationships that we can develop.
Yep.
And so I would just take that one step further and say to everyone listening that in a relationship, the beautiful part about that is the co-creation of the relationship. And so giving thought, and I'm sure that you do this, and maybe you could just speak to this just for a moment, giving thought, and then how do you show up in relationship with all of the beings around you and in helping and supporting them also.
I thank you for that, for being an important point. The term that came to me a few weeks ago is collaborative consciousness. And I really like that because it implies relationship. That when I'm experiencing something like I just described with the ceremony, there is a collaboration in the consciousness that expresses as me and the consciousness that expresses as this other seemingly external being. So I like that because it does imply that there's that relationship there, and it's not, I'm how is it people talk sometimes in New Age, I'm creating this, I'm manifesting this. Well, yeah, kind of. But in another way, in another sense, there's this collaborative process that's going on. Where did the thought come to you for going out and dancing under the moon, under the full moon? Where did that come from? Well, I don't say it. Did it come from my brain, my mind? Did it come from this? And you notice I say seemingly external, because if we think of things as external, it helps us get by day to day in a mundane reality. But there's another place to go with that, is that, it kind of seems like it's out there, but it's also connected and related to me in this process that I love that term, collaborative consciousness. Again, I cannot stress this enough. Robert Lanza, who's a medical doctor and started going off and studying, studying physics and other kinds of things, he came up with I think, a cool statement coming from a scientist, a medical doctor, very well-reputed medical doctor. And that's basically, let's put a capital C on consciousness. And where is your identity as a human being? Typically it's with, I'm Stephen Farmer, this guy, and blah, blah, blah. But what if you can step back into a place of really non-identity, where you don't identify with your name, your background. You don't even identify with your thoughts. That you simply are consciousness expressing as this particular being. Or again, I'm circling back to what I said earlier. But again, I mentioned Robert Lanza because there's a good example of a scientist that's coming around going, well, if you think you're your body and you die, you're going to freak out. But if you can relate to being pure consciousness, when you die, you know that energy that we call consciousness is going to move on somewhere else.
Right. And with that consciousness, right, then we can, hopefully all of us, walk with respect and walk lightly through this world, right?
Yes.
And in collaboration with our, with each other and all of the beings.
Yeah.
I think that's why one of the main reasons I'm so honored at through Sacred You to offer the masterclass The Shaman's Way is because of those, the understanding of the collaboration, of the relationship with the sentient beings, with the earth, with each other, that you teach, that you and the other master teachers and shamans teach. That's at the heart of my understanding of shamanism, and that really truly goes to the heart of what's so important to me. So I just want to say thank you. I want to say thank you, Dr. Farmer, for sharing, your knowledge and your wisdom and your practices with us.
Oh, you're very welcome. And believe me, I'm honored. I feel so blessed, and so grateful to be doing this kind of work. And again, where I'm moving to more and more is training others and doing workshops. I've always done workshops of some sort, but I really like passing along, this knowledge and, dare I say, wisdom to others. I don't sound like I'm bragging about it. It's not a big deal. It's just where I'm at in my life cycle. And as I mentioned, I'm starting another Earth Magic Practitioner training soon in May. And also, I'm really, really excited to be going to Sedona. Who isn't when you go to Sedona? And I'll be doing participating in a conference, and the headliner is Don Miguel Ruiz, who's a beautiful, beautiful man, and two of his sons that'll be teaching, and I think Linda Starwolf, who's also doing Sacred You, the course on shamanism, is going to be there as well, with her specialty, shamanic breathwork. So I'm blessed, and I think, I got to tell you one really, if I have time to tell you one funny story. About 7-8 months ago, I went, I got to be doing some online classes. So I heard that. And so I just think this is how it works. I really was clear I was going to do an online class. I didn't know how. There's a saying says, state your intention and leave the how up to God. And so I left the how up to God because I didn't know what I was going to do or anything. And then I get this call from this woman named Patricia. Mm-hmm. And as they say, the rest is history. And I must commend you too for doing just such an exceptional job, putting these programs together. I think you're offering quite a service to so many in the larger community.
Well, thank you, Stephen, so much. The masterclass is called The Shaman's Way, and it runs from February 5th to March 2nd. Although you can join us at any point, up through March 2nd, because all of the materials are recorded, and even the live calls with the instructors are recorded for you. And Dr. Farmer has his own particular individual course that's part of the masterclass called The Path of the Shaman, and that runs February 19th to the 23rd. So I'll post the link in the comments, and if listeners who want to check it out, Dr. Farmer also offers the first module of his course for free, just for checking it out. So it's just an incredible value and incredible wisdom, and very interactive. And so it's at learn.sacredstoriesmedia.com. And Dr. Farmer, what is your website so that others can also, in addition to going to Sacred You, they can go to your website and find out more?
Sure. It's earthmagic.net, not com, but .net, earthmagic.net. And there's a whole bunch of stuff. There's my schedule. You can sign up for a newsletter. There's articles. There's videos. It's really packed with a lot of information, and also free readings with oracle cards too, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, those are fun. I've done that on your site. I've done those with the power animal cards. Right?
Cool. Yeah. So just visit there, and if you want to sign up for the newsletter, please feel free to do so. It comes out once a month, and it's just basically a fresh article or a short article, and what I'm up to, and some other kind of things that are always going on. Always something going on, Patricia.
Well, that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
Yep.
Because it's all important work. So, Dr. Stephen Farmer, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're very welcome, and thanks for having me.
And I want to say thank you to our audience for joining us. I am your host, Rev Patricia Cagganello, and you have been listening to Not This, Not That.